In the 1990s, there was a clear rise of so-called power women in the music world, a world that had previously been dominated primarily by men. The emergence of female artists such as PJ Harvey, Sheryl Crow, and Tori Amos marked a welcome development and a refreshing change in the familiar musical landscape. In 1995, a young Canadian singer broke through worldwide with her third studio album. After releasing two dance-pop-oriented records, it was time for a new phase and a new sound. That sound, often described as a blend of alternative pop and post-grunge, was perfectly captured on the album Jagged Little Pill by Alanis Morissette. Hello, and welcome to a brand new episode of We're Only in It for the Music, a YouTube series that takes you through the musical universe, from ABBA to Zappa and everything in between and beyond. Click the like and subscribe buttons, and hit the notification bell so you'll never miss an episode. But enough of that. Never mind the bollocks. We're only in it for the music. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We're kicking off the second season of this series with an album review of a record that, as of this year, is already 30 years old. Just like Alanis herself, the album has had 3 decades to mature, and we can now look back on a true 90s classic. Jagged Little Pill, or JLP as I'll abbreviate it for the rest of this video, might very well be the very first CD I ever bought with my own money. Although I'm not entirely 100% sure about that. There was so much music around at the time when I started developing my own taste, and once I had pocket money to spend, there was no stopping me. I am, however, fairly certain that it wasn't 1995 when I bought JLP. Not because I needed a whole year to save up, although CDs were outrageously expensive back then, but simply because it took a while before Alanis reached me through MTV, and before I decided that I wanted to listen to this album in the store and make a well-considered purchase. Yes, kids, that's how it worked back then. Perhaps even more ironic than the lyrics of her big hit Ironic is the fact that I bought this album almost 30 years ago on CD, only to purchase it again years later on vinyl. A completely unnecessary purchase. But there's no real logic in the world of collecting physical media. People in the 80s replaced their LPs en masse with the brand new CDs, but more than 25 years after the release, I ended up buying the LP version of JLP, simply because I think it's such a fantastic album. Are you ready for a heavy dose of Jagged Little Pill? Start the intro music because Season 2 has officially begun. In 1995, Alanis had already released 2 albums in Canada. Under just her first name, she debuted in 1991 with a self-titled album, followed a year later by Now Is the Time. Many people probably always assumed that JLP was her debut album, and I myself didn't know for a long time that Alanis had released 2 dance pop albums in Canada as a teenager. These 2 records aren't available on Spotify, but I'll share the YouTube links below this video so you can still hear how Alanis originally started out. After the season finale of Season 1, the Live Aid special, I had so much trouble with the YouTube robots over copyright issues that I'm not taking any risks of getting another claim for playing music from her pre-JLP era. That's not the hill I want to die on. I choose my battles carefully. For my research, I did listen to both albums, and my conclusion is this. Album 1 sounds like the kind of teenage dance pop Robin Sparkles from How I Met Your Mother would have made. Album 2, Now Is the Time, has something reminiscent of her fellow Canadian Celine Dion. Big, sweeping, emotional productions, but musically it's miles away from the glory of JLP. Morissette was only 19 when she moved from Canada to the United States and met producer and songwriter Glenn Ballard. The two had instant chemistry and started writing songs together almost immediately. This would become the foundation of Alanis's third studio album. But because the musical direction and lyrical content differed so drastically from her first 2 records, they decided to release it under her full name. It marked the beginning of a new chapter in her musical career. In that sense, JLP really is Morissette's debut. Her first truly adult studio album, and what a debut it was. As I mentioned, I first discovered Alanis through MTV and the video for Ironic. Critics have pointed out over the years that the lyrics of Ironic don't actually deal with irony at all, but rather with a series of unfortunate situations or circumstances. The fact that a song called Ironic isn't actually ironic, that is irony at its finest. Oh, irony. So there I was, in a CD store, browsing through all the albums the mid-1990s had to offer at that moment. Lots of pop, rock, electronic dance, and plenty of boy and girl bands. All I really knew was that I thought Ironic was a beautiful song. It simply sounded good to my ears. I definitely wasn't thinking about the concept of irony. Because I had no idea what the album cover looked like, I asked the store clerk if they had the Alanis Morissette CD in stock. It wouldn't surprise me if I even struggled to pronounce her name correctly at the time. It was probably somewhere in 1996. So JLP was already a hugely successful album by then, meaning the clerk had definitely stocked it well. He showed me the CD case complete with the booklet. I remember that while I was listening to the CD in the store, I flipped through the booklet and was immediately intrigued by the strangeness of the artwork. JLP doesn't exactly have a standard cover design, and to this day, I'm still not entirely sure whether I actually like the cover or not. All I know is that I found it instantly interesting. JLP opened with All I Really Want. The combination of that funky, distorted guitar riff and the harmonica grabbed my attention immediately. I didn't understand much of the lyrics yet. That's a layer of JLP I would only unravel much later. But instinctively, I could tell right away that Alanis meant business. Listening to JLP in my teenage years felt a bit like how I listened to fado or French chansons. I don't understand a single word that's being sung, but I feel all the emotion and urgency in the voice. Near the end of the song, Alanis asked the question, "Why are you so petrified of silence?" Here, can you handle this? Followed by a few seconds of absolute silence. I still think that's a brilliant choice. Silence is essential in music, but people sometimes forget that. We tend to fill music completely. More layers, more instruments. Everything has to be big and thick and loud so it can reach the listener. But those few seconds of pure silence are, to me, the best element of the entire song. Because I didn't fully understand the lyrics at the time, I paid much more attention to Alanis's voice and the way she sang. And as you know, her voice is anything but standard. She has a very unique vocal style, and whether you like it or not is simply a matter of taste, but it grabbed me immediately. Instinctively, I felt that this woman was a fascinating person. You Oughta Know was a major hit and immediately put Alanis on the musical map. The funky bass by Flea and the grungy guitars by Dave Navarro from the Red Hot Chili Peppers give the song exactly the kind of edge that perfectly matches the biting vocals and lyrics. Alanis turned out to be someone you definitely shouldn't mess with. Don't mess with Miss Morissette. After two powerful statements from a young woman standing firmly in her strength, precisely because she isn't afraid to show her vulnerability at times, things calmed down with the song Perfect. The song, which deals with performance pressure and expectations, instantly became one of my many favorites on the album. Here, Alanis showcases perfectly how effortlessly she can switch from restrained, gentle singing to the emotional, almost hysterical vocals she displayed in the previous two tracks. The guitars are beautifully delicate, giving the song a kind of comforting calm. The song truly lives up to its title, Perfect. A drum loop opens Hand in My Pocket, a song full of lyrical contradictions, a style I personally love. Despite all the turmoil in the words, the song breathes a sense of acceptance. Hand in your pocket, staying calm and centered while the world rushes past you. Hand in My Pocket is the dose of optimism and comfort that JLP needs to stay balanced as an album. With Right Through You, things start rocking hard again, leaving no room for reflection or calm. The vocals are once again biting, and the music has that perfect post-grunge sound, radio-friendly enough to reach a broad audience, yet alternative enough to make you believe you're a true connoisseur with a very special taste. Alongside you, of course, were millions of others, because JLP sold like crazy, but you didn't know that at the time. Exactly halfway through the album, we dive into dramatic territory as Morissette takes aim at the Catholic Church in the lyrics of Forgiven for Christ's sake. How many people haven't been hurt in some way by the influence of the church? Now, this isn't a platform to bash the church. They don't need my help with that. Over the past decades, they've been more than capable of smashing their own stained glass windows. Besides, we're here for the music. What I do want to say is how important Alanis has been in consciously or unconsciously shifting the idea that female artists first and foremost had to look good, because eye candy sells. And if they could sing a bit, great. but leave the substance to the record executives. Ms. Morissette is far too smart to play that game and stands up for her right as a woman to say and sing what she thinks and believes. That makes it all the more remarkable that her first two albums fit so neatly into that hollow pop music corner. But we've all been young and naive, so Alanis is more than forgiven. Just like the title of this song, you see what I did there? Connecting the dots. After the heavy Forgiven, the album brings back a sense of lightness with the comforting and uplifting You Learn, catchy as hell and driven by an irresistible groove. Swallow It Down, What a Jagged Little Pill, Alanis sings, followed by a whole list of well-meant advice. Jagged Little Pill isn't exactly a logical album title at first glance, but I often find that titles hidden within song lyrics are the best, or at least the most interesting. Nothing is given away too quickly. The meaning isn't spelled out as obviously. And then the music. Of course, Morissette's voice is sublime and unique, and her lyrics are urgent and surprisingly mature for a 19-year-old. But don't forget that the arrangements never miss the mark either. The songs are constructed so well that you often don't even notice how perfectly everything fits together. Maybe that's the true magic of JLP. The lightness continues with Head Over Feet. On any average album, this song could easily be the standout track. On JLP, it's simply one of many highlights, serving mainly to maintain that all-important balance between lightness and heavier themes and moods. Some people unfairly dismiss Morissette as a woman who's always angry or resentful, but there's a lot of humor in her work, even if it's often tongue-in-cheek or deadpan. There's very little humor to be found in the song Mary Jane, a song that tells the story of a friend in need. It was a brilliant decision not to make this track too heavy musically or vocally. The more restrained and subtle musical backdrop suits the song perfectly. Alanis can get her point across without having to overpower her own message. Still, the soft, loud dynamic remains present throughout the entire track. But as a listener, you're free to decide whether the softer or the more intense vocal passages hit the hardest. One thing is certain, Alanis offers comfort, to Mary Jane and to anyone who needs it just as much. Before making this video, I never fully realized how much comfort JLP offers lyrically to the listener. Maybe that's another reason why this album is so beloved by the public. Then comes Ironic, which, ironically enough, technically isn't actually about irony. That, as I mentioned earlier, is the ultimate form of irony. Once again, Alanis and her producer Glenn Ballard used the soft, loud dynamic that was so characteristic of early 90s grunge. The lyrics may miss the mark according to some critics, but it's still just a really strong song. In the end, you're better off being lucky than being right. And here, too, Alanis clearly shows that she has a great sense of humor. That sense of humor continues in Not the Doctor, although the humor here is much sharper than in Ironic. At this point in JLP, you really start to notice how often Morissette uses a listing style in her songwriting. Many of her songs on JLP are essentially lists of things. Pieces of advice, things she does or doesn't want to be, things she does or doesn't want to do. She would make this style even more explicit in the opening track of her 2002 album Under Rug Swept. The album kicks off with 21 Things I Want in a Lover, a song that says, "These are the requirements, meet them, or you can leave and stay away." Wake Up is the so-called final track of JLP, but that depends entirely on which media format you're using. If you're playing the album on vinyl, Wake Up closes JLP in a very satisfying way. But if you listen to JLP on CD, you were, especially on that very first spin, surprised by a hidden track, an alternative version or mix of You Oughta Know. Maybe it was just my hearing back then, nearly 30 years ago, but I never noticed any difference at all, and was always puzzled as to why that song needed to appear twice on one CD. Much like Wake Up, I was far more taken with the a cappella track, Your House, because it wasn't listed on the cover. I always called it Forgive Me Love after the refrain. As great as the music on JLP is, nothing really compares to the purity of just Alanis's voice on its own. It's almost criminal that this song was relegated to hidden track status. It did get a second chance when Morissette re-recorded the entire album in an acoustic version. And while I do think that version is quite beautiful, it misses the urgency and emotional depth I feel in the original a cappella recording. JLP. Acoustic is a fine reinterpretation of the electric originals, but 4 of those songs had already appeared in unplugged form, and the abundant vocal embellishments throughout JLP Acoustic could have been used a bit more sparingly, if you ask me. Even after 30 years, JLP still holds a timeless sense of class. I've sometimes wondered whether I love JLP so much simply because I listened to it endlessly as a teenager. You'd buy an album and play it to death because you'd spent so much money on it. So yes, for me, JLP is partly built on nostalgia and youthful sentiment, but there are plenty of albums I bought and overplayed in that same period that I rarely pull off the shelf. Nowadays, JLP has something magical, something that keeps me coming back to it even now. Morissette released many strong albums after JLP, but none of them ever quite captured the magic of this one. Every follow-up album had a few gems, but I must honestly admit that after So-Called Chaos in 2004, I haven't listened to anything new from her. Not by choice. Sometimes you just unintentionally lose sight of an artist. So I actually haven't followed Alanis musically for nearly 20 years. Yet I still consider her a highly influential singer, and JLP is something I'll always cherish. If I haven't kept up with Alanis for 2 decades, am I even in a position to say anything about her? This entire review is a personal analysis of the Jagged Little Pill album. For the dry facts and hard data, you can always check Wikipedia. Let me also say that I really appreciate all the comments in the community section of this channel, but posts that begin with, first, a few corrections, always give me the feeling they're written by people who don't get invited to parties. Then again, I'm only human. Yes, I am human. Even though some people seem to think there's nothing but an AI robot behind this channel, I'm a human being, and I can overlook things in my research. So the fact that you, as a viewer, take the time to correct my mistakes is something I should actually appreciate. And I sincerely do. Thank you for your time and effort. Long story short, JLP celebrates its 30th anniversary this year, which is pretty shocking when you think about it. Time moves so fast. In my opinion, JLP hasn't lost an ounce of its power in those 30 years. That's quite an achievement for Alanis. It may also mean that everything she's released since then will forever be compared to JLP. And to be fair, she doesn't shy away from keeping the album's legacy alive herself through the various reissues and even a full-blown musical, Jagged Little Pill. The musical. The fuck? What's next? Nirvana, the musical. Wait, they're working on that right now? The fuck? Where is the music world heading? Is nothing sacred anymore? The fact that a powerful rock album like JLP has been turned into a musical is frankly a bitter pill to swallow. I'd rather take a Jagged Little Pill musical statement from an angry 19-year-old transformed into a Broadway musical. Now that is the irony right there. Isn't that ironic, don't you think? My favorites from JLP are All I Really Want, Perfect, Hand in My Pocket, You Learn, Head Over Feet, Mary Jane, Ironic, and the hidden track, Your House. Listen to all the music from this series in the Spotify playlist. You'll find the link below the video. And that was Alanis Morissette. That was Jagged Little Pill. What do you think of Alanis and of JLP? Leave a comment in the section below this video and check out the social media pages on Facebook and Instagram for all updates. Because I will follow you if you follow me. And please don't forget to click like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. It's much appreciated. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time. And in the meantime, drop the needle, push play, and remember, we're only in it for the music.